You talk about Jefferson warned about Supreme Court's power.
Absolutely.
Boy, we've got it going on.
Well, we really do. Our founders were very, very astute. And by the way, this is not about my book, but I would encourage any and all of our listeners to check out David Barton's website at wallbuilders.com.
Yes.
You just don't find anything more detailed. He's the most brilliant guy on this subject. I've
gone
his
on DVD.
There. Absolutely. In fact, a lot of the material and content in this book, I actually went on his website and read the writings of our founding fathers and so forth, and it's just detailed for you. In fact,
on Glenn Beck all the time.
I would say to anyone who doubts, we're being told today again that America was birthed to be a religious melting pot. Well, that's simply not true. But I would encourage any critic, just go to the website and read the documents for yourself. I was just engaged in a conversation on a radio interview a couple of days ago on a station in Charlottesville, Virginia. And the issue came up about, the ACLU and their... what's interesting is I happen to write in my book about how the ACLU started out right. The purpose of their founding and what they were doing there was a good thing.
Well, unions started out right.
Exactly.
And now they own America.
And now, as time progressed, of course, we've gone 180 degrees from where we need to be.
Something else has taken them over.
Absolutely. Yeah.
America's classrooms. That's what I see.
Yeah.
That the minds of the young people, when you can capture that, you now change the direction of America. And that's why we're going socialistic, progressive, all of that. It's happening right before our eyes. I never thought that I would ever see it in my lifetime.
Listen, me neither, but you're so right. If you go back and look to the days prior to World War II, and you look at how we began in that time frame to bring in forms of what we call of higher criticism, rationalism, etc. Basically, we imported philosophy from European universities and institutions of higher learning. As a result of that, what's happened is we actually started teaching that philosophy, and we also started teaching Marxism and communism and socialism in our universities. Now, the problem is as time has gone by, those students that got a heavy dose of that, and that was not counterbalanced by the truths of the greatness of America, et cetera, and capitalism and free market. Exactly. And as a result of that, we're now, down the road 60, 70 years from the inception of that, and now we're reaping, because what you look at Washington today, and somebody said, the word politician comes from the Latin politic, which simply by definition means multiple bloodsuckers. Now, I don't say that about all politicians.
I like that.
Okay? But the truth is that we've got a real serious problem in Washington, because the truth is they are operating from a different worldview than we are. And where did they get that worldview? They got it years ago in our institutions of higher learning, and now today they really are doing what they believe in their own mind is the best thing for us. And to us who love freedom, who love capitalism, who love the free market society, who love the very principles that the Word of God teaches us, and that America's founded on, we're shocked and appalled at what's happening. And we're standing there saying, how could anyone do these kinds of things? It's because of their mindset.
It's amazing. Franklin Graham kind of alluded to this, but if Baptists or Presbyterians, or pick whoever you want to, had flown planes into the towers, we would be profiling every Christian in every walk of life, every place they flew, every place they had lunch. Isn't it amazing that the Muslims, and of course you have to say the radical Muslims, but I've had converted Muslims on here, and I've asked them point blank, okay, tell me the truth. If you were not a radical, but just a Muslim, and they take over, would you then become exactly as they are? And they would look me right in the eye, every one, and said yes. So there's no such thing as, okay, I'm just a good guy Muslim, and this guy is a radical. Because once it comes, it's all together.
And having been to the Middle East over 150 times, I can tell you since 1971, these many journeys, having been to Jordan and Egypt and Syria and so forth and so on, and of course all over Israel and Judea and Samaria, the so-called occupied territories. The truth of the matter is that Islam is a non-tolerant religion. Today they make up 20% of the world's population, 1.2 billion. And we're told of that only 10% are radical jihadists. So that means there's only 120 million who get up out of bed every day and go to bed every night with one thing on their mind, and that is to destroy Israel in the West.
That's all.
Now, the problem is in Washington, and the reason they just don't get it there, quite frankly, is because they're trying to deal with Iran and the Muslim world in a political arena as opposed to a religious arena.
That's exactly
and that's
right.
why when we sit up here and listen to the stark raving mad lunatic president of Iran as he rants and raves about the destruction of Israel and blah, 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 the truth is that we don't understand why sanctions won't work. It doesn't matter what kind of sanctions the world would try to impose on Iran. They are on a religious mission.
That's right.
As you well know, and I know that you've talked about this on your program before, the president, along with the ruling mullahs of Iran, are members of this group called the Twelvers, who believe that in 941 A.D., the 12th descendant of Muhammad disappeared. Obviously was assassinated, but they think he's been living in a well 40 miles outside Tehran all this time. But they claim that in the end of time, he's going to return, and he's going to establish Islam then as the dominant religion in the world, which finally the crescent moon, when Islam was birthed in 640 A.D., was intended to be the full moon when Islam dominated the world. So they're going to finally have world domination, but here's the caveat in this. This can't happen until there's a worldwide catastrophe. Now, by the way, it's interesting to me when I listen to their ideology and philosophy, you wonder, where did they get an idea like this? Very simple. Somebody read the New Testament.
That's right.
They read the book of Revelation. They read how there's going to be the battle of Armageddon, and then Jesus and Christ is going to come, and he's going to establish a 1,000-year reign of peace on the face of the earth. Well, they read all that and got that all twisted and suited to their own philosophy. But the truth is, these men believe this. They believe that they have been appointed by Allah to bring about that worldwide catastrophe. So no matter how hard Washington tries to initiate a political policy with them, it's religiously driven, and that's what they don't get.
They don't get it.
And by the way,
right.
it's interesting. I was reading just a few days ago. I was in Bend, Oregon, doing a conference here a couple of weeks ago, and because that was on Pacific Coast time, and I'm on Central time, I woke up about 4 o'clock in the morning. Well, I turned on the television, and I'm satisfied I got to C-SPAN book club thing. There was probably me and one other person in the whole world that was watching that program.
That's right.
At 4 o'clock in the morning. But I was interested because George Friedman was there talking about his book, The Next 100 Years, a Forecast for the 21st Century. George Friedman is a very articulate, intelligent individual, and I'm listening to him talk about his, this next coming years and his forecast and so forth. So much so that I immediately got on my Kindle and downloaded the book and read the book. But what was so interesting, this is the point I want to make, in contrast to what I've written and what he's written, is this. George Friedman's writing about the coming days exclusive of God. In other words, here's a forecast of the next 100 years omitting God and the hand of God in history. God has no part in this, blah, 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 and this is what you can expect to happen. On the other hand, when I'm writing and talking and teaching, and many others of us as well, we're talking about what the future holds based on the only reliable source for what the future holds, and that's the Word of God.
That's right.
And so as we write about future events, we can speak candidly and authoritatively about what's going to happen in the future, and here's why. A fourth of the Bible was prophetic at the time that it was written, and every single prophecy that had over 500 of them already literally been fulfilled to the most minute degree, like 109 just in the coming of Jesus alone the first time. Well, obviously the rest of them are going to be fulfilled. But I quickly jump over to Ezekiel chapter 38 and look at how here is a prophecy given 2,500 years ago through the prophet Ezekiel that speaks of a time when there will be a Russian-led Islamic invasion of Israel. So what are we seeing? Iran and Russia, for the first time ever, enter into a military pact just recently. We're seeing the geopolitical alignment of the nations exactly as are portrayed in the Scriptures. Mm-hmm. And what we do is we have to ask ourselves a question. Since this has been written 2,500 years ago, has there ever been a time when something like this has happened? The answer is no. So what we know then is that this is a future event, and we're now seeing these things shaping up to take place. So here's Washington trying to figure out what in the world to do with Iran. when in fact the Word of God says this is what's going to happen. And by the way, the Israelis have read Ezekiel 38 also. And they know what's coming. So my